Welcome, everyone, and happy Easter. We're glad that you are here at this very transformative time of the cycle. Easter is always known as a renewed effort of awakening. And as was reminded in our preamble, one student said, we are all part of this universal mind. And so this cycle that we're in of Easter time is really important for this. So again, thank you for joining in to our first of 3 series on Saturday at 9 or 1, respectively, wherever time you are in the planet. And this year we explore the mind higher and lower. Mind is a mystery that has not fully uttered itself. Its capabilities continue to surprise us in the evolution of our humanity. But we ever keep in view the idea of unity, for all beings have that same one potential, and it unfolds in countless ways. We are at a round in evolution where our physical instrument has reached a point where this contrariety of mind, higher and lower, reveals itself to us. And now, by our own effort, through the choices that we make, we evolve the mind and the heart to a dome more vast, as one poet says, capable of greater knowledge of the true nature of man and the cosmos. So we begin with Jerry, where he speaks of freeing the mind, manas, and identity. Well, we should say that we'll start with that.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for those wonderful thoughts too. That's a wonderful way to get us started today. Welcome everybody from all over the world. It's a privilege and a joy to be with all of you. It's a curious fact that so much of human life revolves around what we call mind, but remains one of our deepest contemporary mysteries. Is there anything closer to us than mind? Don't we live and move and have our being for so much of our waking life in our thoughts, feelings, and emotions? Yet how little attention we pay to choosing our thoughts, fostering our feelings, and directing our emotions. Who's in charge? The mystery of the mind is built right into our very language. We speak of, I lost my mind, like we're misplacing car keys. Changing our mind, like putting on a different set of clothes. We say, my mind's slipping, like slipping on an icy surface. Or I'm making up my mind, like tidying up the bed in the morning. We speak of having something on our mind, like having a heavy stone on our chest while laying flat on the ground. We say, something comes to mind, like a visitor from out of town. My mind is a blank, like it were some sort of empty bank account. Or I'm of two minds on that question, like we had two heads or we were two people. We say, I'm in a particular frame of mind, like we lived inside a portrait painting. When the athlete is in a groove, we say, she's playing out of her mind, as if she took it out and set it aside. And lastly, the gruesome metaphor, blowing my mind. All of this leads us to believe, in regards to the mind, we don't know where it is, where it's going, what it's doing, or how it works. Despite every effort in modern psychology to define and categorize the mind over the last 100 years, we viewed the mind in some form, we view the mind as some form of a machine, or in our time, that machine or metaphor is the computer, both of them being the invention of a human mind. The predominant view is the mind is just a synonym for the brain, which is, they say, a complex series of chemical and electrical activities. Even with clinical studies, social surveys, extensive surgery, lab testing, contemporary psychology cannot explain, little less appreciate, the mysteries of language, the majesty of music, the innovation of engineering, the subtlety of poetry, the creativity of literature, just to give a few examples. All of these things defy modern explanation of brain activity, nor can modern psychology account for out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences wherein the subject was conscious, but the brain had ceased to function. In light of these mysteries, the honest scientist confronted with the questions of what is mind, how does it work, might simply answer, I don't know. And with this admission, the first step towards real knowledge might be taken. You see, in the ancient world, and to some degree in the vestiges of Eastern spiritual traditions today, the study of the mind is paramount. We have to go back to classical notions of mind found in the annals of the ancients to move closer to the esoteric conceptions found in Theosophy, divine wisdom. To appreciate classical conceptions of mind, we have to consider ideas like the logos in ancient Greece, the Tao in ancient China, or Mahat in ancient India. Here you will find correlations with metaphysical intelligences, cosmic forces, sublime energies of creativity capable of willing into being an entire universe. A universe filled with thousands of gods, demigods, the denizens of nature, animal, vegetable, and mineral, and with that mankind marvelously dancing in the middle. All of it, according to our ancient forebears, the production of mind. The Tao is the source of the 10,000 things. Krishna, speaking as Mahat behind the manifestation, tells us that he created this universe with a single portion of himself, yet remains separate, using the mystic power of Maya, or thought. The Greeks sang about the Logos in the cosmos and the God in man. In fact, the Greek story of how man acquired mind is worth revisiting here. In the story of Prometheus, whose very name means to think ahead, we have Prometheus as a titan, an ancient race of demigods that ruled during a golden age prior to the Olympian gods. Prometheus was tasked with creating man in the image of the gods during the Olympian cycle, but without self-consciousness. Zeus wanted mankind to be obedient to the will of the Olympians. Taking pity on the subjugated state of this creation, Prometheus stole fire from the gods, symbolizing mind, and gave it to man in defiance of this order. For this crime, he was sentenced to be chained to a mountain and visited by an eagle each day who tortured him mercilessly by tearing away at his liver. In Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, he writes, "Thy godlike crime was to be kind, to render with thy precepts less the sum of human wretchedness, and strengthen man with his own mind." Hence, man acquired self-consciousness, which we will hear more about in the next presentation, and acquired the capacity to choose, the capacity to plan ahead, the capacity to imagine, the capacity to identify, the ability to observe oneself, and the capacity to create. The ancient Sanskrit word for mind is manas. The etymology of the word is derived from man, meaning to think. It is indeed the root from which we get the word man in English. But the word manas means far more and has much richer connotations than the English word mind, with all of its muddle and clutter. In Sanskrit, the term manas includes what we moderns might call heart, the capacity to feel deeply, to sympathize, to compassionate, using the brilliant phrase of Walt Whitman. In The Secret Doctrine, H.P. Blavatsky says this about mind.
Mind is a name given to the sum of the states of consciousness grouped under thought, will, and feeling. During deep sleep, ideation ceases on the physical plane and memory is in abeyance. Thus, for the time being, mind is not, because the organ through which the ego manifests ideation and memory on the material plane has temporarily ceased to function. A noumenon can become a phenomenon on any plane of existence only by manifesting on that plane through an appropriate basis or vehicle. And during the long night of rest called pralaya, when all the existences are dissolved, the universal mind remains as a permanent possibility of mental action, or as that abstract absolute thought, of which mind is the concrete relative manifestation. The Ahi, Dhyani Chohans, are the collective hosts of spiritual beings, the angelic hosts of Christianity, the Elohim and messengers of the Jews, who are the vehicle for the manifestation of the divine or universal thought and will. They are the intelligent forces that give to and enact in nature her own laws, while themselves acting according to laws imposed upon them in a similar manner by still higher powers. But they are not the personifications of the powers of nature as erroneously thought. This hierarchy of spiritual beings through which the universal mind comes into action is like an army, a host, truly by means of which the fighting power of a nation manifests itself, and which is composed of army corps, divisions, brigades, regiments, and so forth, each with its separate individuality or life and its limited freedom of action and limited responsibilities, each contained in a larger individuality to which its own interests are subservient, and each containing less individualities in itself. Mind.
Okay, now this actually is mind-blowing. This passage reveals three very important ideas that we can draw from it, amongst many others. First, mind includes thought, will, and feeling. Secondly, the source of mind in man is divine and a mirroring of cosmic mind. And thirdly, mind is a collection of intelligences on a series of planes constituting a host or hierarchy of spiritual forces. Is that complex enough? What is thought? What is will? What is feeling? What powers do they have, and how are they related to each other? We will have 3 meetings over 3 weeks to explore these things, but what we can gather from HPB's words is the immense potential and possibilities accrued to man due to the lighting up of manas, the activation of this vesture of our constitution. In esoteric philosophy, human nature is sevenfold, replicating the sevenfold nature of all manifestation. truly a microcosm of the macrocosm, an expression we students of Theosophy never tire of repeating. Manas is the bridge principle, spanning the distance between the manifest and the unmanifest, between the esoteric and the exoteric, between the universal and the particular, between the homogeneous and the heterogeneous, and ultimately, spirit and matter. And herein lies the great conundrum and challenging mystery of mind. In the philosophy of the Gupta Vidya, in the teachings of modern and ancient Theosophia, mind, or manas, is dual. There is a higher and a lower component to it, yet ultimately and mysteriously it is really one, as are all the principles and vestures of man ultimately one. But for the sake of evolution, and in the service of the human pilgrimage towards enlightenment, there must be higher and lower mind. Here and again, let us hear the words of the sage.
Try to imagine a spirit, a celestial being, whether we call it by one name or another, divine in its essential nature, yet not pure enough to be one with the all, and having, in order to achieve this, to so purify its nature as to finally gain that goal. It can do so only by passing individually and personally. That is to say, spiritually and physically, through every experience and feeling that exists in the manifold or differentiated universe. It has, therefore, after having gained such experience in the lower kingdoms, and having ascended higher and still higher, with every rung on the ladder of being, to pass through every experience on the human planes. In its very essence, it is thought, and is therefore called in its plurality Manasaputra, the sons of the universal mind. This individualized thought is what we Theosophists call the real ego, the thinking entity imprisoned in a case of flesh and bones. This is surely a spiritual entity, not matter, and such entities are the incarnating egos that inform the bundle of animal matter called mankind, and whose names are manasa, or minds. But once imprisoned or incarnate, their essence becomes dual. That is to say, the rays of the eternal divine mind, considered as individual entities, assume a twofold attribute, which is A, their essential inherent characteristic, heaven-aspiring mind, higher manas, and B, the human quality of thinking or animal cogitation, rationalized owing to the superiority of the human brain, the kama tending or lower manas. One gravitates toward buddhi, the other tending downward to the seat of passions and animal desires. The latter have no room in Devakan, nor can they associate with the divine triad which ascends as one into mental bliss. Yet it is the ego, the monastic entity, which is held responsible for all the sins of the lower attributes, just as a parent is answerable for the transgressions of his child, so long as the latter remains irresponsible. From the Key to Theosophy by Madame H.B. Blavatsky.
I'd like to focus upon the very first sentence of this passage when she says, Try to imagine a spirit, a celestial being. First, a spirit has no limit in time or location in space. Secondly, the act of imagination is one of the critical powers of the mind. And the capacity to imagine is instrumental in the elevation of consciousness. What we can imagine, we are drawn to like a magnet. This is why Robert Crosby stresses the saying, try, try, ever keep trying. Realization comes from dwelling on the thing to be realized. And what do we dwell upon? More and more universal conceptions of self, for starters. We cannot grow and improve further than the idea of self we can imagine. A river cannot rise higher than its source, is the ancient adage. Dream big, you might say. So why does pop psychology and New Age spirituality throw so much shade on the mind and its activity? What does the voice of the silence mean when it says, the mind is the great slayer of the real? Let the disciple slay the slayer. It sounds like we need to get rid of the mind, if that were at all possible. It is true that we can see the mind as both slave and slave master, disciple and teacher, all rolled into one. And this again is due in part to the dual nature of mind, which we are exploring in this series. Let us begin by dispelling a misconception. It is a mistake to assume lower mind bad, higher mind good. This kind of dualistic thinking is harmful and misleading. Lower mind, when functioning under the influence of its higher counterpart, demonstrates profound levels of reason, creativity, logic, innovation, sympathy, and empathy. After all, lower mind is responsible, at least in part, for the Mona Lisa, Mozart's great G minor symphony, the pyramids, the Eiffel Tower, the sanctuary of Machu Picchu, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Magna Carta, the 13th Amendment, Moby Dick, and Harry Potter. Higher mind does not operate on this worldly plane. It overbroods it, we are told. So the purified lower mind, acting in concert with its parent source, is magnificent and worthy of our respect. And there always is a but in a world where light and darkness are the world's eternal ways. The lower mind, caught in the clutches of kama, or selfish desire, is an entirely different matter. And unfortunately, at this stage of human evolution, it is the central nemesis of mankind, otherwise known as selfishness, which the Buddha would add is the result of separateness, Plato ignorance, Lao Tzu imbalance. The countless wars, man's inhumanity to man, racism, inequality, misogyny, tyranny, dogmatism, hatred, and the like are all the fruit of kama manas. Think of it as mind trapped and dominated by selfish desires. The lovers of wisdom, genuine thinkers, developing the intellect and the heart in tandem. Maybe when Pythagoras coined the term Philosophia, he meant love and wisdom. What we love, we are drawn to. There is a sacred heart within each human being which longs to connect. The love of children, the dearness of friendship, the commitment of couples are all reflections of this inner desire to merge the drop into the ocean. It is human to connect. Once we embrace the idea of a sevenfold nature in man, we can experiment with the idea of the dual nature of manas. Am I both witness and participant? Observer and contestant? What part of human nature continues on after the death of the body? How can I tap that part of myself now while in the body? Could it be the mind is not in the body, but instead uses the brain and the body from who knows where. The mere asking of these questions puts us in a mental space of critical distance from the persona, the mask, the man or woman in the world. Thoreau called it a strange sense of doubleness. Patanjali calls it the witness position. Robert Crosby, the perceiver. When we engage in the mental exercise of putting ourselves in that impersonal posture, we can begin to experience a fleeting taste of immortality. We begin to feel a flickering of being outside the persona, or that self within is looking at the world through the persona. People who have a near-death experience and witness themselves outside the body know about this. They experience life outside their personality and gain confidence in the veracity of it. With effort and persistence and meditation, we are told, any human being can experience, although fleetingly perhaps, this deeper sense of self. But we need the larger vision of an overarching philosophy to make sense of this experiment with truth. Theosophy offers a context in which to understand this deeper pilgrimage of the soul, a pilgrimage we have been on for a long time, over countless lives.
Try to imagine a spirit, a celestial being, whether
Excuse me. So what does it mean when Lao Tzu says, the sage has no self of his own? He makes the self of others his own. Is this any different from what the voice of the silence teaches when it says, thou shalt not separate thy being from being and the rest, but merge ocean in the drop within the ocean? So shalt thou be in full accord with all that lives. Bear love to men as though they were thy brother pupils, disciples of one teacher, the sons of one sweet mother. Nature and evolution does not proceed by leaps and jumps, but rather gradually and incrementally. We are training the mind to look at life from the standpoint of the immortal self within, after millenniums identifying with our vestures. The immortal individuality, the self within, has no area code, no phone number, no specific gender, no permanent residence, knows no national boundaries, no particular language, no favorites, no worries, no attachments, and it is not exclusive to any particular family, but rather a member of each and all of them. A self that naturally feels life through the lives of other people and even other creatures, like Lao Tzu explained. A self that cares nothing for any possessions in this world, but cares deeply about wisdom and compassion and the suffering caused by ignorance. So we persist in asking the question, who am I? It is a question worthy of asking over and over again, and in some real sense, it is a question without an answer. Because the drop must re-become the ocean, and the ocean is in the drop. The very notion of soul, or even the more modern notion of the self, has to do with wholeness. This exploration of the idea of self is an activity of manas, aided by buddhi, what we would call mind and heart. And one way to think of it is as a very long conversation with oneself. A conversation, if you will, between higher and lower mind, a dialogue between spectator and participant. There's a simple exercise anybody can do to gain a sense of this dynamic. Take a walk by yourself and observe yourself as if you were someone else. Watch yourself walking. Pretend that you entered into the persona of another person and are experiencing the walk through the eyes of that person. You will gain the feeling that there is something that is not in this body, but something that is using the body to take the walk. Through the eyes of that person, various views and objects are being perceived. This Other self is merely watching as if sitting at a movie theater. Thoreau called this a strange sense of doubleness, and it is a universal experience brought on by the dual nature of monos. Thoreau said, by a conscious effort of the mind, we can stand aloof from our actions and their consequences, and all things, good and bad, go by us like a torrent. We are not wholly involved in nature. I may be either the driftwood in the stream or Indra in the sky looking down upon it. I may be affected by a theatrical exhibition, on the other hand. I may not be affected by the actual event, which appears to concern me much more. I only know myself as a human entity, the scene, so to speak, of thoughts and affections, and am sensible of a certain doubleness by which I can stand as remote from myself as from another. However intense my experience, I am conscious of the presence and criticism of a part of me, which, as it were, is not a part of me, but spectator, sharing no experience, but taking note of it. And that is no more I than it is you. When the play, it may be a tragedy, of life is over, the spectator goes his way. It was kind of a fiction, a work of imagination only, so far as he was concerned. So hanging on to this sense of doubleness, maintaining an awareness of the spectator, while in the act of participation, is called continuity of consciousness. It takes practice. The mountaineer takes on an ascent slightly more difficult than previous achievements. She strains to be able to do more and go farther than she had gone before. They call it a project, a discipline, an adventure, a goal. And once achieved, she looks for a new project, more difficult from the last. Gaining continuity of consciousness will require many experiments and is similar to the training and discipline of the mountaineer. Our studies are an effort to wipe away the dust on the lenses of the mind. We need bigger ideas, a broader perspective. And like the sheriff in the movie Jaws, who sees the actual size of the shark in the water and declares, I think we're going to need a bigger boat. We need bigger ideas than the ones we presently hold, no matter how clever we think we are. And how could any of these experiments with truth be carried out if there were not higher and lower mind? Who and what is the subject of our experiments? The persona, of course. Could it be that the whispering of Buddhi Manas to lower Manas is perpetual, constant, and we're just not listening? Or perhaps we don't know how to listen. We struggle to be quiet and to quiet the mind from the noise of the world, the desire for sensations, the itch for stimulation. And perhaps in all the hubbub, simply forget to consult what the voice of the silence and the light on the path call the master within. So with every new day, we try again. Thank you very much.